The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room flickered overhead as Dr. Madison examined the unconscious boy on the gurney. Outside, his mother, Sonia, stood by a window, clutching her phone with trembling hands. The call from the police was swift and cold, alerting her that her son Elijah had been in an incident. Nothing prepared her for the bruised, battered face she barely recognized. The nurses whispered, the air thick with an unspoken tension that cast long, shadowy fingers over the sterile tiles. Her heart crushed under the weight of disbelief and rage. Sonia blocked out the chatter around her, focusing solely on her son's motionless form. Across town, murmurs were already shifting from shock to anger. The neighborhood buzzed with but a singular narrative. Elijah, a bright-eyed 16-year-old, known for his humility and big dreams, had fallen victim to a brutal assault by those sworn to protect. The story was everywhere, spreading like wildfire through the community, inflaming old wounds and igniting new fury. Faces turned to Sonia, looking to her for strength, for answers. A jolt of clarity cut through her daze. Sonia Warren was about to do something no mother anticipated or desired. Her despair turned into a steely resolve. She was going to bring the entire department down for what they did to her son. She knew that Elijah's story was not isolated. Many black families had suffered silently in the throes of the justice system. Sonia whispered a silent vow, her fingers ghosting over the phone screen as she saved the contact for a civil rights lawyer who came highly recommended. Not one to be silenced, she began to make calls, each connection a spark in a spreading blaze of accountability. Within hours, Sonia had gathered allies. A small crowd of community leaders stood with her, their faces a tapestry of shared history and resistance. They convened in her living room, the walls echoing with the names of those who had similarly suffered. Tension crackled in the cramped space, the conversations punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of Elijah's heart monitor, heard through her phone on speaker. Martha, a seasoned lawyer with a spine of steel and eyes like polished obsidian, took charge, briefing Sonia on the avenues available. We won't just seek justice, we'll demand change. Each stone they threw, we'll build a foundation for a brighter future with, Martha declared, her voice the cool, commanding edge of a rallying point. Meanwhile, the police department scrambled. Chief Langley stood before a nervous assembly of officers, each word he spoke a measured tightrope. The story had gone viral faster than they could manage. Internal whispers of dissent and denial wove through the rank and file, a web that threatened to ensnare all in its tangle. Langley's own eyes betrayed him. Beneath the veneer of authority lay an undercurrent of desperation, of secrets held too long. He knew the stakes. This wasn't just about Elijah. It was about a culture steeped in prejudices and the impending exposure that could burn it all to ashes. But Sonia was unyielding, and with voices lifted alongside hers, she began a campaign of awareness and accountability. Her phone buzzed with messages of solidarity from across state lines, activists, local politicians, ordinary citizens united in their outrage. Each echo of justice for Elijah that lit up online began as a chorus, amplifying into a roar that penetrated institutions long accustomed to operating in shadows. Sonia, what's our next move? Elijah's best friend Malik asked, breaking the storm of voices. The room fell silent, eyes fixed on Sonia's determined gaze. We keep fighting, no matter what they throw at us, Sonia replied, her voice steady, her resolve as unyielding as granite. For Elijah, for all our kids, this ends here. Undeterred by the looming battle, Sonia understood they were on the brink of something monumental. She was just a mother fighting for her child, yet in that fight lay the potential to transform power dynamics, to unmask injustice with unwavering truth. As the night deepened, casting over the city a profound quiet, Sonia Warren stood firm, knowing the dawn would bring a fierce reckoning. Elijah's story was no longer just his. It was the chronicle of a community's stand against an endemic tyranny challenging a long-standing order. This was the first spark, and Sonia was ready to set the world alight for the truth. As dawn broke over the neighborhood, casting long shadows against the brick facades and chain-link fences. Sonia prepared for the battle ahead. Her resolve, forged in the dark hours by Elijah's hospital bedside, had only strengthened with the morning light. She moved through her home with a quiet intensity, each step a reminder of the burden she carried, each breath a steadying draft of courage. The community was beginning to stir. Word of last night's gathering had spread, and people were eager to discuss the incident that had rattled their collective conscience. Sonia stepped outside, the cool morning air a brief balm. Neighbors she'd known for years began to gather on her front porch, their faces a mix of concern and determination. As they settled into a loose circle on the worn steps and walkway, Sonia took a deep breath, preparing to speak. Her voice, though slightly trembling from exhaustion and emotion, held a clear message, one that resounded with a force born of righteous indignation. "This is about more than Elijah," she began, meeting each of their gazes with unwavering eyes. "This is about all of us, our children, our families. It's about justice, about demanding answers and accountability." Her words ignited a spark, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement. For too long, these stories of violence and prejudice had lived in the margins, whispered about but rarely confronted. Sonia's determination was infectious. It charged the air, emboldening those gathered to believe change was possible. By calling attention to her son's plight, she was also highlighting their own, forcing a reckoning with the systemic racism that had plagued them. An older woman, Miss Elsie, who had lived in the neighborhood all her life, spoke next. Her voice was like gravel underfoot, ripe with years of lived experience. "We've seen too many lives cut down by them with badges, but they've gone too far now, messing with one of ours in such a blatant way. No more. We'll get behind you, Sonia." The promise lifted the spirits on the porch like a banner unfurling in the breeze. They began discussing the next steps. Malik, still reeling from his best friend's assault, arrived with a fervor that mirrored Sonia's. He offered to organize a neighborhood meeting, pulling in younger voices to strengthen their cause. As the porch meeting continued, Sonia's phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a flurry of notifications, texts from concerned relatives, a voicemail from the local news station requesting an interview, and messages from civil rights groups offering support. The outpouring was overwhelming, yet it steeled her resolve even further. She agreed to speak with the press, to keep Elijah's story front and center in the public's mind. The news conference was hastily arranged, set up against the backdrop of Elijah's high school, a place where he had thrived both in academics and on the basketball court. The pressure was palpable. The growing media presence, a testament to the power of their combined voices. Standing before the crowd, with microphones pointed and cameras rolling, Sonia transformed her grief into a call for action. "My son lies in a hospital bed because of unchecked brutality," she declared, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. "But this fight is not just about him. It is about dismantling a system that allows officers to act with impunity." She recounted Elijah's character, his dreams of college, his love for making his siblings laugh, painting a picture of the life so violently disrupted by those who should have been his protectors. Behind her, a crowd of students and teachers held signs that read, "Justice for Elijah" and "Accountability Now." The media's presence signified a pivotal moment. Elijah's story, while tragic and deeply personal, was now a symbol of a larger struggle. The reporters ate up every word, questions flying thick and fast, hungry to capture the emotional heart of the narrative. Sonia's words spread like a wave across the city, bolstering the efforts of those fighting for justice within halls of power she rarely considered. She had become, overnight, a reluctant but formidable activist, driven by love and fury to tear down the walls of systemic oppression. Each step forward revealed grim realities, yet with each new ally, each shared story, her determination grew. Elijah had been wronged, but in that injustice lay the seeds of an uprising, a resolute stand that pulsed with the enduring hope for equality. This was just the beginning, and Sonia Warren would not rest until justice was not only served but institutionalized in a way that honored her son's spirit and protected future generations. The law office buzzed with urgency, a stark contrast to the solemnities of the hospital and the defiant determination on Sonia's porch. Thick files were strewn across the polished oak conference table, pages of police reports, witness statements, and photographs capturing the bruises modeling Elijah's skin, each one a damning testament to the brutality he faced. Martha, Sonia's civil rights attorney, had seen it all before, yet her resolve was tested anew by each fresh injustice she encountered. "Miss Warren, this is where we begin to hit back," Martha intoned, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the stack of evidence splayed before them. Her voice was authoritative, imbued with a calm conviction that lent Sonia a bolster of confidence amidst the ongoing storm. They sat in a small conference room, the walls lined with the weary spirits of past battles fought and won. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin, resolute stripes, seemingly casting bars against an unjust world. Martha's demeanor was no nonsense, her direct gaze holding Sonia's with steadfast resolve. "The key is to push for a federal investigation. It's the only way we can ensure the case reaches beyond local bias," she continued, poring over the documents with meticulous care. "We've got grounds for a civil rights violation lawsuit, and with enough pressure, the Justice Department will have to open a case." Sonia nodded, absorbing each word with the focus of a parent entrenched in the fiercest fight of her life. Her ideas, once hazy with grief, were beginning to crystallize into a determined clarity. "What can I do to help? What do we need to make this happen?" she asked, her voice a joint of steel and softness. "We need public pressure," Martha replied. "We continue moving the needle in the media while also going after the department's management. There should be emails, mimosany things showing a pattern of abuse. Fortunately, the press is already running stories. There are allies in this." The legal journey they embarked on was a daunting labyrinth, yet Martha navigated through with expertise, drawing on years of experience facing similar battles. Her office was a sanctuary of strategy and justice, each win and loss archived in memories lodged in the thick legal tomes lining the shelves or encapsulated in the framed newspaper clippings on the walls. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a young associate burst in, excitement barely contained. "Martha, the DA's office just issued a statement. They're reopening past complaints against the officers involved." This news sent a ripple of triumph through the room, momentarily cutting through the tension. Sonia felt the beginnings of hope unfurling cautiously in her chest. It was a small victory, a reflection of the growing success of their efforts, as well as a testament to Elijah's casing his suffering. A crack had appeared in the walls of systemic oppression. "Excellent," Martha responded, a small smile lifting the corner of her mouth. "Keep me updated. And Sonia, this is promising. This means they're feeling the pressure." Meanwhile, outside the office, the city roiled with energy, the streets thrumming with conversations of justice and reform. Fueling these fires, Sonia returned home, prepared to galvanize further support. She knew firsthand the power of collective voices, echoing louder than any message in a courtroom. Strolling into her kitchen, she found Malik animatedly planning the details of their next community action. "We've got most of the neighborhood coming out for the protest. It's going to be big," Malik announced, a fiery determination sparking in his eyes. A grin flickered across Sonia's weary features, lessening her exhaustion with its earnest energy. Sonia understood implicitly, manifesting her resilience into action with kindling resolve to fortify not just Elijah's defense, but also to prevent future injustices. "Let's keep pushing. We'll show them exactly what we're capable of," she enthused, her voice filled with the fervor of 1,000 unsung battles. Their commitment culminated in a bold step as Sonia and the community continued to shore up foundations of change, brick by determined brick. It wasn't just about Elijah anymore, it was about dismantling a whole system designed to overlook their voices, a system she was now poised to relentlessly challenge. As she settled into her role as an advocate and agitator, Sonia's world expanded anew. Every day was a new battle, every conversation a potential breakthrough. Entrenched in struggle, she revolved around a single, immutable truth. The fight for justice was exhausting, yet absolutely necessary. And as dusk fell on the city, with the warm hues of sunset cascading through her windows, a hopeful certainty underpinned her determination. Tomorrow held promise. Doors were opening that couldn't be closed, truths emerging that couldn't be buried. With every legal maneuver and public statement, Sonia moved them one step closer to justice, forging a path through through the dense fog of inequity. This was only the beginning, and she was ready for whatever was to come. The news conference swirled in a maelstrom of camera flashes and shouted questions, transforming the tranquil park where it took place into a stage for a fervent public drama. Reporters jockeyed for the best angles, their lenses trained on Sonia at the center, framed against a backdrop of towering oak trees and hastily erected banners demanding justice for Elijah. Each banner was a testament to the community's unity, their words bold and defiant. The crowd was electric, charged with the collective power of shared outrage and resolve. Community leaders and activists stood beside Sonia, a phalanx of solidarity that lent strength to her every word. As she stepped forward to the cluster of microphones, a hush fell over the crowd, tension hanging in the balance like a taut wire. "My son, Elijah, is lying in a hospital room fighting for his life because of a violent system that needs to end," Sonia began, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze remained fierce, focused. "This is not just about him. It's about every child, every family that has been touched by this injustice, and we will not stop until we see real accountability." As Sonia spoke, a quiet ripple ran through the crowd. Eyes met, affirmations were whispered, and fists tightened around makeshift signs. This was more than a plea. It was a declaration of war on complacency and complicity. It was a call to action that resonated with everyone who had known the sting of systemic prejudice. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing each phrase that fell from Sonia's lips, translating her pain and passion into sound bites that would echo across the country. The media's appetite for the story was voracious, each headline a clarion call for justice that increased the growing pressure on local officials to act. Reginald Walker, a prominent activist who had spearheaded numerous civil rights campaigns, seized the opportunity to add his seasoned voice to the clamor for change. "They must feel our presence, hear our voices," he bellowed, the resonance of his words thundering through the park. "This is the moment where we change the narrative, for Elijah, for all of us." His words met with a roar of approval from the crowd, a wave of determination that rolled forward with unstoppable momentum. Across America, televisions flickered with news segments carrying the story into living rooms, spurring conversations and inciting a broader national discussion about policing and justice. Sonia was astounded by the sheer reach of their efforts. Invitations poured in for interviews, panel discussions, and forums. What had started as a mother's anguished cry had become a movement, with Elijah's face becoming a banner for a nationwide call for reform. Meanwhile, in the corridors of power, the story was stirring discomfort, prompting reluctant discussions among those who had long overseen the status quo. City officials huddled in closed-door meetings, weighing the storm of public unrest against their teetering platforms. Mayor Joseph Callahan, under increasing scrutiny, found himself maneuvering through a minefield of political repercussions. As his aides presented him with an avalanche of public opinion data, all pointing toward overwhelming support for a formal inquiry into the police department's practices, he understood the political necessity of action. Reluctantly, Callahan drafted a statement announcing the city's intention to cooperate with the federal investigation and promising transparency and reform. It was a calculated gesture, one that sought to siphon off the building tension, but inevitably too little and too late to appease the fervent outcry bred from numberless years of suffering in silence. Back at the park, as the event began to wind down, Sonia lingered, her feet cemented to the earth beneath her. The press gradually dispersed, but the crowd of supporters remained, their solidarity a warm bolster against the fading daylight. They gathered around her, offering words of encouragement and determination. Malik, standing nearby, captured the moment on his phone, a testament to their relentless pursuit of justice. With each click, he documented not just an event, but a movement that would ripple outward into history. Elijah's battle was far from over, but Sonia had ignited a flame within her heart and in the hearts of many others, vowing to ensure that his suffering would lead to substantive change. Her journey was just beginning, fueled by love, determined protest, and the indomitable power of collective action. The stakes were incredibly high, but standing on the precipice of change, she knew they were unequivocally commensurate with the cause. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was irrefutable: there would be no turning back. City Hall buzzed with a tense energy, the air thick with the weight of political maneuvering and grim anticipation. Mayor Joseph Callahan sat in his wood-paneled office, its normally serene ambiance disrupted by the frantic pacing of aides and the constant ring of telephones. His statement to the public had done little to quell the turmoil brewing outside these walls. The inquiry into the police department was now unavoidable, fueled by Sonia's relentless exposure of the department's practices and the growing unrest in the city. Callahan glanced over the statement that had been released earlier that day, the words now glaringly insufficient. Years of carefully managed appearances and rhetoric about community safety were unraveling under the harsh scrutiny of a scandal that cut straight to the heart of the city's long-ignored racial disparities. Already, a federal team was being assembled, each step forward compromising the careful balance he'd striven to maintain throughout his career. Outside, summer's oppressive heat pressed down on the city, matching the simmering tempers of its inhabitants. As protesters gathered in ever-growing numbers, their placards lofted toward the sun, the tension was palpable. Chants calling for justice echoed off the buildings, creating a symphony of dissent that poured into the air with relentless fervor. Callahan steeled himself for the meeting he was about to walk into, a closed-door session with city council members and representatives from the police department. It would be a delicate dance of rhetoric, concession, and hopefully, reform. He knew they had to address the mounting public pressure, a sentiment intensified by media portrayal and community activism spearheaded by voices like Sonia's. As he entered the room, a hush fell over the gathering. The council chamber, ornate with wood carvings and plush seating, became a crucible for intense debate. Chief Langley already stood at one end of the long table, his presence a tangible reminder of the department's defensive posture. His stony expression betrayed no emotion, but the darkness rimming his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "We need measures that demonstrate accountability," Callahan began, his voice steady but underlined with urgency. "Enough has come to light that demands strong, decisive action. The public demands it. We must meet them with transparency and earnest reform." Langley shifted, his posture betraying a reluctance to concede ground. "The majority of our officers uphold their duty with honor. We can't paint everyone with the same brush because of a few bad apples," he countered, his tone edged with frustration. "We can't afford to hide behind that justification any longer," interjected Councilwoman Maria Beltran, an outspoken advocate for police accountability. "These aren't isolated incidents. They're symptomatic of deeper, systemic issues. If we don't address this now, we risk more than just public trust. We're endangering public safety." The room crackled with tension as arguments volleyed across the table, each side fiercely defending their stance. Callahan knew compromises would be necessary, yet anything less than radical transparency and reform would be insufficient in this charged atmosphere. He had to salvage what little control remained without sacrificing the integrity demanded by the unfolding events. Across town, Sonia continued her advocacy work, unaware of the adjourned meeting's heated exchanges, but knowing full well the stakes involved. She was on a live call with a national news network, her voice clear and unwavering as she recounted Elijah's story, emphasizing the broader implications of their struggle. "Elijah's case is not unique," Sonia replied to a probing question from the anchor. "What happened to him is rooted in a culture that's been allowed to fester. We're calling for a comprehensive overhaul not just of policies, but of the mindset that treats Black lives as expendable." Her words reverberated across social media platforms, reinvigorating the call for justice and lending further credence to the scrutiny on City Hall's maneuvers. Each passing day saw their cause gaining traction, like an incoming tide against the entrenched barriers of institutional resistance. Meanwhile, Callahan's meetings skated toward uncertain resolutions, the air charged with the friction of clashing ideals and hardened perspectives. As discussions dragged on, the once clear line between maintaining order and embracing reform blurred under the weight of their deliberations. Eventually, as the meeting drew toward a tense close, a tentative conclusion emerged: implementation of a task force to oversee department reforms, citizen review boards, and mandatory bias training. It was a start, though Callahan knew it would face backlash from both staunch supporters of law enforcement and more radical advocates of immediate restructuring. Back at her home, Sonia received a message news of the proposed reforms had reached her quickly through the network of activists and allies. The message carried the weight of an initial victory, albeit a cautious one, a new starting line in a race that was far from over. Understanding the gravity of their undertaking, she continued to push forward, committed to harnessing the momentum they'd built to ensure Elijah's story was but the first in a cascade of transformative change. As dusk cloaked the city once again, the streets shimmered under the fluorescence of streetlights and burning justice, united in a promise to never again allow silence to prevail over truth. As daylight stretched into late afternoon, the once quiet streets of the neighborhood began to pulse with the rhythmic footsteps of a gathering crowd. The community was rallying, converging on the Central Park, their faces grim with resolve but alight with hope and determination. The call had gone out through whispers, posts, and shared anger, bringing together not just those who had directly felt the sting of injustice, but also allies who saw this as a shared battle against a corrupted system. Banners announcing justice for Elijah fluttered in the breeze, each one handmade and vibrant with the vivid colors of youthful exuberance and creativity. The air vibrated with the sounds of drums beaten by local musicians, their steady rhythms providing a heartbeat for the movement. At its core stood Sonia, transformed from a grieving mother into an unwitting symbol of resistance and hope. Sonia stood amidst the throng, her spirit buoyed by the multitude around her. The crowd spilled over the park's boundaries, diverse faces all turned towards her, anticipating her words. She stepped onto a makeshift stage, constructed from wooden pallets hurriedly assembled by volunteers. Her heart pounded in her chest, more from anticipation and resolve than nerves. Malik was by her side, eyes fierce and determined, reflecting the tenacity of the youth that had spearheaded much of the grassroots organizing. "You've got this, Miss Warren. We're all behind you," he murmured, squeezing her arm reassuringly. Raising a hand for silence, she scanned the sea of faces, finding strength in every determined gaze meeting hers. When she spoke, her voice was clear and resonant, echoing across the park with the weight of unwavering conviction. "This is our stand, our demand for justice," she began, her voice gaining strength. "They have hurt our children, our future, with impunity. But today, we say no more. Elijah's struggle is our struggle. This is the first step, but not the last." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy swelling like a tidal wave. They were not just witnesses in this unraveling saga, but active participants writing themselves into its chapters. Various members of the community took turns at the microphone, their stories raw and revealing of a shared history of marginalization. Each voice added volumes to the narrative, echoes of the pain experienced by countless individuals. There was Betty, recounting how her brother had been unfairly incarcerated years ago, and Marcus, a teacher who spoke of systemic bias faced by students in schools. As more voices joined the chorus, the protest became a tapestry of shared experiences interwoven with threads of anger, grief, and determination. The vibrant synergy of the assembled community was underscored by the hum of cameras, news crews capturing the gravity of the moment and broadcasting it to an eager, attentive nation. Standing on the outskirts of the crowd, young Avery, eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination, watched the speeches unfold. Despite the weariness of one so young, anger brewed within her. She recalled her brother's laughter, remembered the countless basketball games they played in their driveway. It was for him that she clutched her handwritten sign tighter, her small voice ringing out amid the clamor. "This is for Elijah." The protest maintained its momentum well into the evening, transitioning from speeches to a peaceful march through the heart of the community. Linked arm in arm, the participants moved with fluid unity, their chants absorbed by the city's pulsing rhythm, echoing off buildings and through alleyways. Onlookers watched in awe as thousands poured through the streets, an unstoppable force demanding recognition. It was a testament to the strength inherent in collective action, a force compelling change through sheer human will. As the parade circled back to the park, dawn creeping over the horizon, the tired but triumphant crowd dispersed, their faces illuminated by the dawning realization that change felt within reach if pursued with unrelenting vigor. Sonia lingered, watching as the last of the protesters drifted into the twilight, the sense of solidarity a warm glow in her chest. As the sky deepened into night above the city, she knew their battle was far from over. Yet, empowered by the collective determination she had witnessed, Sonia felt assured that the tide was turning, each voice stemming a current of injustice. Standing in the aftermath of this powerful demonstration, her resolve was renewed. Elijah's name had been etched into the annals of their community, a catalyst that sparked vital conversations across the country. She was no longer alone. Her family had grown to include thousands who stood unwaveringly in pursuit of justice, arms linked around the promise of a brighter tomorrow. With each step forward, Sonia embraced the future, committed to seeing this fight through until Elijah's story became a testament to enduring change. Together, they would rise undaunted, unstoppable, and undying in their demand for justice. Inside the police department on the other side of town, the atmosphere was brittle, like the charged air before a storm. Officers clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones tinged with apprehension and defensiveness. There was no dismissing the escalating protests or the media's relentless coverage of Elijah's case. Every whispered conversation seemed to echo off the drab walls, as if sharing a secret everyone already knew. Chief Langley stood away from his men, his face a mask of controlled emotion. The events unfurling outside had reached inside the precinct, igniting tensions that officials had long pretended to snuff out with hollow platitudes and superficial training. Langley's mind raced, weighing the situation that had already spiraled beyond institutional control. He had been with the department long enough to see how these investigations went. His job was to maintain unity, to preserve morale, while investigative eyes bore into their operations. Yet, beneath his seasoned exterior, a seed of panic had taken root, fueled by the public's rising call for accountability and the internal fractures beginning to show. A memo had circulated earlier that morning, instructing officers to adhere strictly to protocol, especially when engaged with the public. More importantly, it served as a thinly veiled reminder to close ranks, shielding comrades as controversy brewed. But there were murmurs of dissent growing even among them. Younger officers especially questioned the status quo, their voices becoming louder and harder to dismiss with each passing day. Inside a cramped office, two officers hunched over a set of files, tension etched into every line of their bodies. Officer Bennett leaned back in his swiveling chair, a muscle in his jaw twitching beneath his skin. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered, casting a furtive glance at his partner. "People are not just angry, they're coming for us." His partner, Officer Torres, nodded, her eyes scanning the latest articles pinned to the department notice board. She had joined motivated by an idealistic notion of justice, but the harsh realities she'd witnessed within the force had chipped away at her enthusiasm. This latest incident was more than just a wake-up call, it was an existential reckoning. "We fucked up, Bennett," Torres admitted quietly, a note of bitter resignation in her voice. "We can't keep doing things the way we always have. Something needs to change. Something's gotta give." Bennett regarded her cautiously. "You know they won't take kindly to insubordination." "Hell, Langley's making sure everyone's on board with damage control," he replied, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You sure you want to go against the grain?" Silence hung between them like a thread stretched to breaking point. Both understood the implications of speaking up, aware of the systemic backlash that had silenced others before them. She remained firm, a spark of determination igniting in her gaze. "If we don't, it'll be far worse. The people, they're not just angry anymore, they're demanding to be heard." Her voice softened, growing more resolute in the pauses. "We need to own up to this, make amends. Someone has to stand up for what's right whether the brass likes it or not." Their exchange ended with a shared understanding, an unspoken agreement to step beyond the shadows and carry the burden of truth. Their discussion lingered in the room, offspring of a legacy of choices that had yet to be adjudicated by due clarity. As the day wore on, the department remained a microcosm of turmoil. Officers arrived for shifts under the weight of public scrutiny, their previously unshakable confidence now a fragile veneer. Within precinct walls, rumors of potential whistleblowers surfaced, injecting further unease into an already fractious environment. Some desperately clung to the traditional narratives of the thin blue line, while others, like Torres, steeled themselves for decisions they knew would challenge alliances. Outside, the city stirred with renewed vigor, ignoring the oppressive heat. The protests continued, a living testament to unified dissent demanding action beyond performative gestures. Sonia's advocacy had pulled the department into an uncomfortable spotlight, exposing fractures they could no longer paper over with rhetoric or delay. Anonymity was transforming into accountability, the whispers urging towards transparency that had long been buried in departmental backrooms. Inch by inch, the power balance began to shift, not with a clang or clamor, but with steady resolve and the courage to confront indifference. Beneath the growing arch of day that presided over the city, Sonia anticipated the next phase of their campaign. They had breached the city's inertia and now approached the heart, testing its willingness to face the truth. It wouldn't be easy, the path riddled with opposition from those seeking to protect entrenched power, but the tide was turning. Elijah's struggle was now a beacon, promising that through collective endeavor and tireless will, justice could indeed prevail. In the dimly lit parking lot behind the precinct, Officer Torres leaned against the hood of her car, the crisp evening air a welcome relief after the day's suffocating tension. She checked her watch frequently, anticipation stitching her nerves into a tighter weave. It would have been easier to dismiss the impulse that had brought her here, to shake the conflict from her shoulders and sink back into the murmur of compliance. But Torres had that flash of clarity only a few find and fewer hold on to, a desperate need to be a light in the oppressive gloom of silence. The heavy door of the precinct creaked open, and a figure slipped into the shadows, pausing as if listening for danger. It was Officer Bennett, his silhouette briefly outlined by the dim glow of the streetlight. His approach was cautious, deliberate, as if each step weighed heavy under the significance of their meeting. He shoved his hands into his pockets, eyes scanning the lot and the surrounding alleyways. "You sure about this?" he asked, a layer of doubt hanging on his gruff voice. Though they stood alone, the gravity of the moment brought their voices down to little more than whispers. "Yes," Torres replied resolutely. "We need to get this information out there. Elijah deserves that much, and his family deserves the truth, not concealment." Bennett nodded, though the corners of his lips tugged downwards with apprehension. Reaching into his jacket, he withdrew a small flash drive, the plastic shining faintly in the fading light. "Here," he said, pressing it into her palm. "It's all their reports, body cam footage, stuff they didn't want getting out. This could change everything." Torres closed her fingers around the drive, its weight more significant than mere gigabytes of data. This was evidence, a testament to the illicit underbelly of departmental operations, long buried under layers of rank protectionism. It was the semblance of accountability they had all promised to uphold, now brought to light by two within their own ranks. "Thank you," she murmured, gratitude apparent in her voice. It was a dangerous move, a breach of unspoken codes that bound officers tighter than any regulations. Yet both knew it was the right thing to do. As they parted ways, the full impact of their decision lingered in the cold evening air. Torres felt the ripple of adrenaline as she walked away, aware that the drive in her possession could tilt the balance, but also bring unforeseen consequences upon them both. Still, the path she had chosen was one she could not turn away from, motivated by the hope that perhaps at last, change might begin to take root. Torres didn't pause until she reached her small apartment. As she entered, she considered the shadow that had passed across her life, her thoughts darting to Elijah's mother, Sonia undaunted, fearless, and her own quiet inspiration. She knew what she held was not just information, but also the potential for retribution against the system and perhaps even against her own career. Seated at her kitchen table, she connected the drive to her laptop, the screen casting a pallid glow against the gloom. She watched the files open, each byte a testament to more than Elijah's brutal ordeal, but to others who had suffered similarly in silence. It was both liberating and terrifying in its veracity. An hour later, after composing a brief but decisive email, she attached the files and hit send. The recipients included Martha, Sonia's tenacious civil rights lawyer, and crucial media contacts who had been probing the department's defenses. Each one would find their inbox enriched with the reality of systemic failures, forced into daylight by an act of courage from within. The decision made, Torres exhaled deeply. It was a small gesture, but profound in its simplicity and exhalation, echoing the release of long-held fears, replaced by the resolve to stand on the side of truth. The implications would unfold in days to come. Media outlets would broadcast the exposed files with headline after dramatic headline, intensifying the spotlight on a department unprepared for scrutiny. Her actions would send waves through council meetings and community gatherings, fortifying the demands for an overhauled justice system with new, undeniable evidence. As night deepened around her, Torres understood that she had become part of a larger narrative driven by people like Sonia, who refused to let shadows prevail. In the quietude of her apartment, she found comfort in knowing that despite the potential fallout, she had taken a necessary step towards justice. For Elijah, for his family, and for everyone caught in the crosshairs of American injustice, it was a step she would never regret taking. The district attorney's office, ensconced within the city's looming civic center, buzzed with an energy rarely seen outside of election cycles or major scandals. As the sun's first rays pierced through the windows, the office was already awake, alive with the rustling of papers, the click-clacking of keyboards, and the muted discussions that brimmed with urgency. In the sanctity of his wood-paneled office, D.A. Alan Graves was grappling with the implications of the evidence now in public circulation. The flash drive delivered by an anonymous source had blown open the lid on the police department's entrenched tenets. Sitting in his chair, Graves let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. His desk was littered with files, but it was the stark prints of the documents from the flash drive that captured his full attention. Each piece of evidence was a revelation that demanded resolve. Graves had prided himself on his judicious reputation, carefully cultivating an image of fairness, but now he sat at the nexus of a storm not of his making. The choice, standing before him, was a pivotal one: to uphold the veil of the long-standing relationship with law enforcement, or to pierce through, letting transparency and justice prevail. One by one, Graves flicked through the contents. Body cam footage of Elijah's brutal assault frames, burning the savagery into indelible memory, as well as damning records of complaints buried and ignored. Murmurs within the community had become unabated roars, demanding action. The decision he made today would echo throughout his career, shaping perceptions for years to come. There was a knock on his door, interrupting his reverie. Sarah Mitchell, his deputy, strode in, her expression steely with determination, betraying the resolve they both felt was necessary. "Alan," she began, setting another stack of press clippings before him, "the public's driving this harder than anything we've seen. An investigation is no longer just the right thing, it's inevitable. If we don't act, they'll come for us next." Graves leaned back, digesting her words. Every corner he turned, expectations pressed in, not only from the public but from within the halls of power that carved out his world. "Yeah, I know," he replied, voice flattened by consideration. "We need to convene a special grand jury. Let's get the process rolling. This can't wait." Their decision sent waves through the office, the DA's chamber transforming into an epicenter of legal strategy. Sarah moved swiftly, dispatching instructions, setting plans into motion. Didactic discussions spread out among junior attorneys and aides, the air thick with purpose. The public awaited their response with bated breath. News of this sudden decisive action filtered back to Sonia, her heart swelling with a cautious optimism. Each new development brought the potential for deeper change, and she knew Elijah's case was embodying a momentum that stretched beyond their immediate struggle to effect systemic transformation. As the day unfolded, media outlets captured this twist with their typical frenzy, amplifying each revelation. Journalists peppered the statements with analysis, speculation, and commentary, increasing the pressure on all parties involved. Social media erupted with renewed vigor, hashtags rallying global attention. Elijah Warren had become much more than a victim. His name represented a call for justice that could no longer be contained. Inside her modest home, Sonia watched the news reports unfold. Each burst of information was a fresh validation of their relentless efforts. Her phone buzzed incessantly messages of support, inquiries from journalists, and updates from Martha. In every corner of the nation, people were resonating with their struggle, compelled to action by the resounding clarity of their narrative. Meanwhile, In the legal sphere, the wheels of justice began to turn. Graves' team expedited the process, gathering evidence, preparing to call witnesses, laying the groundwork for a trial that would inevitably rivet the eyes of the country. Elijah's assault had become the case of conscience, an allegory of broader societal ills. On the streets, the community's response was unwavering, bolstered by their victories and emboldened by the escalating coverage. They understood the importance of seizing this moment, leveraging their momentum to ensure that their voices remained unyielding. Every member played a role, from organizing peaceful marches to engaging in dialogues with civic leaders, each action aimed at carving out a future where justice was not merely spoken but lived. As dusk began to fall, the DA's office flickered with light, an unending pursuit of preparedness for what promised to be a complex and layered trial. Graves sat quietly in his office, aware of the battles ahead, but fortified by the knowledge that this was a necessary confrontation between moral conscience and entrenched tradition. Across the city, so did Sonia, buoyed by the shared resolve she felt echoing through the streets below. In this battle for freedom and justice, she had discovered both friends and allies ready to stand by her till the end. Amidst the chorus calling for change, she recognized they'd reached a turning point, each moment painting a potent narrative that captured an undeniable truth. Together, they were unstoppable. The sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital echoed with subdued tones, the life and death gravity of its results mediated by the soft padding of shoe soles on linoleum and the rhythmic bleeps of medical monitors. Sonia found herself rooted at the boundary between despair and hope, ensconced in the ICU, where each breath offered silent courage. Despite the flurry of activity just beyond the doors, here, time dragged its feet slowly, each moment an exercise in patience and uncertainty. Elijah lay unmoving under early morning rays filtering through the blinds, his presence both fragile and formidable. The machines tracked his condition with unceasing vigilance, their never-ending cycles of noise betraying the raw truth he was fighting for each precious breath. Sonia sat by his bedside, her fingers continually brushing against his, a lifeline tethering her to reality. Around her, friends and family moved like specters, their whispers like a soft chorus echoing in the dimly lit room. Malik was a constant presence, a sentry whose energy never flagged. He stood at the window, spinning a basketball idly in his hands, its rhythmic turning a comforting repetitive gesture in the face of his best friend's ongoing battle. "Hey, Mrs. Warren," Malik said quietly, breaking the stillness. His gaze, usually brimming with youthful mischief, held a determined sincerity instead. "Elijah's gonna wake up, I know it. He needs to see what everyone's doing for him out there. He's always been the strong one. This time we're all standing strong for him." Sonia gave him a soft smile, her weariness momentarily lightened by his unwavering belief. "I hope you're right, Malik. Elijah's a fighter," she murmured, the words more buoyant than she felt. "He always found strength, even when it seemed impossible." In this sacred cocoon by Elijah's bedside, stories flowed. It was how they kept his spirit alive, vibrant in their narratives. Marcus, the teacher who had become a pillar of support, joined them, sharing anecdotes of Elijah's school exploits, his natural curiosity, and his growing love for science. Each tale was a reminder that Elijah was more than the sum of the injustice inflicted upon him. He was a beacon of potential, hope, and defiance. "Remember the project on Mars?" Marcus chuckled, his eyes bright beneath the weight of memory. "Elijah insisted that we should aim to get there by the time he was an astronaut." Sonia smiled through the glisten of tears, picturing Elijah with his earnest expression, full of ambitious plans. The pall of grief lightened, her heart buoyed by these reminders of her son's indomitable spirit. Outside the hospital, the world continued its relentless dance, seemingly oblivious to the silent vigil maintained within these walls. Yet, as Sonia knew all too well, their struggle echoed beyond this room, reverberating through marches, meetings, and the hearts of countless people rallying in their support. Throughout the day, visitors streamed in a tapestry of neighbors, activists, students, and friends, each carrying with them the weight of solidarity, their presence imbuing strength into every breath Elijah took. With each update, however incremental any sign of progress, was cause for renewed hope. The doctors, beneath their professional masks, extended warm reassurances where they could. Elijah's vitals were steady, his condition stable. It was a marathon, each hopeful prognosis greeting a new dawn with shared relief. As night deepened, embraced by the silence only found in places of waiting and prayer, a nurse entered, adjusting the sheets around Elijah with practiced care. "He's stable," she told Sonia softly, a benediction wrapped in routine. "And sometimes," she added, perhaps more for her peace than Sonia's, "that's more powerful than you'd believe." Greatness is often the sum of small things done well over long durations. Each vigil, each prayer, every moment shared in silent company, collectively pulling him toward recovery. On those long nights, when sleep was scarce and emotions raw, Sonia allowed herself the embrace of community. She anchored her thoughts on the knowledge that Elijah's struggle transcended personal loss. It was their shared tapestry of triumph and tribulation, a complex weave of past sufferings and future hope. Though uncertainty swirled incessantly around them, the tireless support and resolve fed a fire within Sonia. Her son was trapped in a land between dreams and waking life, yet she knew he was not alone. They stood on vigilant watch for his return. In the quietude of their hospital vigils, against all odds, the certainty remained. Elijah's voice, once softened by circumstance, would rise again, inflamed by justice and endurance, one able to echo aloft against any silencing tides. And when the time came, they would stand ready to weave his future back into vibrant life, bold in the face of whatever came next. The defense team of officers Knight and Collins filed into the conference room, a makeshift war room dominated by a vast, polished table that reflected the tension etched on every face. Arrayed along its length were impassive legal minds, assembled to craft a narrative of exoneration. The stakes of defending the two officers accused of savagery against Elijah were high, the reputations of legal careers bristling under collective pressure. Leading the charge sat Amanda Briggs, a defense attorney known for her bulldog tenacity and sharp intellect. Her career, born from an unshakable belief in due process, had become a minefield of ethically ambiguous victories. Her weary eyes scanned the files before her, a fortress of precedent and technicalities waiting to be leveraged in the officer's favor. "We're looking at charges of aggravated assault and misconduct," Briggs began, her voice cutting through the murmurs of anticipation like a scalpel. "The evidence against our clients is substantial, but remember, what we need is reasonable doubt." She leaned forward, defiance written into every line of her posture. Officer Knight, defiant and unrepentant, shifted uneasily in his seat, his jaw clenched tight. "I've done nothing wrong," he spoke, his voice a growl of pent-up frustration. "All I did was my job. The kid was resisting arrest, and we followed procedure." Collins, sitting beside him, nodded, though inwardly he simmered under the scrutiny. He had always felt a sense of rightness in his duty, but now doubt frayed its edges. The tension of self-preservation clashed with an integral need to reconcile actions with consequence. "The public's perception is against you," Briggs continued, undeterred by the intrusion of their personal conflicts. "The leaked footage, the ongoing protests, these are shaping the narrative, but our focus remains on the facts, on what can be verified in court. Leave emotion out of it," she advised, her directive underscored with the pragmatic authority that brooked no opposition. Their strategy sessions had become a battleground of spin and counterspin, attempting to sidestep the moral hue coloring the justice system's procedural shades of gray. The challenge was formidable, compounded by the swell of public opinion echoing Elijah's fight into a broader demand for justice. From the tone and tenacity of Briggs' counsel, their defense was designed to undercut credibility, question circumstance, and restate the officer's actions as necessary exertions of duty. The rhetoric of fear and authority was front and center. The implications were the lives of those whose actions had veered perilously from the bounds of sworn service. "Remember, we need to redirect attention to what wasn't shown, what's only conjecture, wrapped up in public outrage," Briggs stressed, reinforcing each point with a flick of her fingers on the table like an insistent metronome. The officers exchanged scant glances under the weight of Briggs's focus. They were bound together not just by shared culpability, but by their armor of unexamined beliefs, now cracking under the relentless force of introspection and external scrutiny. As discussions grew more intense, their voices reverberated through corridors where other officers feigned nonchalance while privately assessing the fallout likely to land at their own doors. Allegiances had frayed, the familiar burden of fraternity co-opted by self-preserving instinct. Meanwhile, outside the insulated realms of legal maneuvering and institutional hierarchy, the community's march toward justice continued unabated. Across town, Sonia's resolve strengthened with every passing day. She and her allies were undeterred by the defense's attempts. Each legal maneuver only heightened their resolve to fight for Elijah's truth. In his hospital room, Elijah's form lay motionless, but his struggle served as the fulcrum upon which their cause pivoted. He had become the embodiment of a movement, his name a rallying cry for a righteous upheaval that sought to upend acceptance of brutality. Sonia watched the unfolding dramas with steadfast resilience. The awareness that their courage had unearthed resonant truths spurred her actions, marrying the emotional cadence of personal grief with the indomitable strength forged from communal unity. Back in the conference room, Briggs adjourned with a firm nod, setting the stage for the courtroom showdown that would ensue. Each member carried their assigned tasks, charged with translating policy and precedent into defenses wielded like armor against the onslaught looming beyond the courtroom's door. But beneath their professionalism, something more primal surged: fear, hidden behind the veneer of justice, a recognition that their adversary's cause resonated with a resonant truth unmastered by filed motions. As the room emptied, leaving her alone with her thoughts, Briggs allowed herself a moment of reflection. It was a fleeting acknowledgement that the battle ahead was not just a clash of law but a crucible testing the integrity of those who wield its instruments. Losing was not an option, but victory, fashioned upon such contested grounds, promised no easy accolades. Not far away, Sonia prepared for another day of advocacy, fortified by the knowledge that Elijah's story was inextricably linked with the power and truths of countless others. Their fight promised a piecemeal gleaning of rights long withheld, aimed at remaking systems and spirits in the mold of long-belated fairness. Elijah's trials transcended mere legal wrangling to symbolize the age-old quest for equality. His battle cascaded through halls where justice waited to be served, patient and inevitable. The auditorium was packed, its rows filled with a mix of community members, former police officers, and activists whose presence signaled a growing acknowledgement of the gravity of the moment. At the front stood John Ellis, a retired police chief, now an unexpected ally in the quest for reform. His reputation had long rested on the laurels of proactive leadership and transparency, yet today he stood before the crowd not with laurels, but with the hard truths that had been whispered within insular walls for years. Ellis, tall and with a quiet dignity, approached the podium, scanning the anxious yet expectant faces turned up towards him. His was a voice that had once commanded respect within the force, but today it sought something fundamentally different: accountability and honesty. Behind him, the banner draped across the stage emblazoned with "Justice for Elijah" was a stark reminder of why they had all convened. "I'm not here to defend the indefensible," Ellis began, his voice roughened by age but sharpened by purpose. A palpable tension gripped the room, a collective intake of breath held as he continued. "Instead, I'm here to unravel the layers of silence and complicity that have protected misconduct within our ranks for far too long." His admission was met with surprise, some skeptical murmurs arising from corners resistant to his unflinching deviation from the fraternal narrative. But within that sea of voices, an undercurrent of hope began to pulse, a gentle acknowledgement that change might indeed be possible. "I knew Elijah. I knew his family," Ellis continued, recollecting the community events that brought them together. "This isn't just another story to be snatched and forgotten. It's the reality of lives intersected with bias, misjudgment, and fractured trust." His gaze fell to Sonia, seated in the front row, her eyes locked onto his, as if drawing strength from his confession. The auditorium seemed to breathe collectively through the moments of silence that followed, encapsulating the emotional weight of Ellis's words. They awaited his insights into the underpinnings of the department, the deeper systemic fractures that allowed such crimes to germinate unchecked. Ellis leaned into the microphone, determined to lay bare the truths even as they risked unseating the dignified legacy he'd once hoped to leave behind. "During my years as chief, I heard and witnessed incidents swept under the rug, decisions made not to protect citizens, but to preserve reputation and avoid scandal. With each revelation, The crowd's reaction intensified. Some current officers shifted uneasily, their discomfort palpable. The majority, however, listened in silence, acutely aware of the fissures Ellis's revelations were creating in the edifice of their perceived security, a shattering that demanded a reckoning. Ellis continued, painting a picture of a culture where cliques reigned supreme, where loyalty to the badge outweighed justice, and where reporting misconduct was burdened by fierce retribution. His disclosures cut through the walls of denial like a sharp wind through autumn leaves, scattering old defenses to the ground. Among the audience, whispers of agreement drifted through the air. People exchanged glances, recalling their own brushes with authority, corroborating everything that was now unfolding openly. For some, it was a cathartic moment. For others, the jarring realization of a reality they'd preferred to ignore. A woman in the back, her voice high and determined, broke the silence. "So what do we do now? How do we make sure this stops here?" It was a question meant for Ellis, but it resonated with everyone in attendance, bouncing through the space like a call to arms. Ellis looked out over the audience, this gathering of the disillusioned, but determined, and nodded. "We continue to speak up, support independent oversight, demand rigorous accountability. Above all, we foster an environment that doesn't just ask for change but expects it." As he finished, the room erupted in applause, a resonating sound that filled the cavernous space and overflowed into the streets. People rose to their feet, a visual testament to the acceptance of Ellis's challenge and pledge to stand for something greater. Sonia was among those who stood, her resolve redoubled by Ellis's bold admissions. His honesty created ripples that would remain long after the meeting concluded, a new foundation from which to build their burgeoning movement. Meeting with supporters later in the quiet comfort of her home, Sonia felt a profound sense of momentum. This was no longer just about Elijah, it was about reshaping their community's present and future. It was about mobilizing every resource at their disposal to ensure that Elijah's name was synonymous with a pivotal change toward justice. The meeting with Ellis had offered a seasoned ally's perspectives, yet the struggle continued to grow more complex, demanding more energy, more involvement, more profound everyday acts of courage, and inspired by voices like Ellis's, they were ready to answer that call. The evening sky thickened with stars as the gathering dissipated, but rather than fade into the backdrop of an unyielding night, they pushed back against the darkness with unmitigated strength and hope. With every step forward, Sonia and her allies knew that the truths unearthed today would illuminate their path to a brighter, fairer society. The evening air was thick with anticipation as protesters filled the city square, transforming the familiar landscape into a tableau of resistance, brightly lit by the flickering glow of burning candles. The usual symphony of urban life had been replaced by the swelling chorus of determined voices, chanting in unison like a rising tide breaking against the walls of City Hall. Sonia stood at the forefront, gripping a megaphone as she surveyed the gathering crowd. From all walks of life, people converged together, a diverse spectrum of faces united by the burning desire for justice. Their placards bore slogans of hope and defiance, each one a shorthand for the anger and aspirations driving them to the streets. "Tonight, we stand together," Sonia announced, her voice amplified over the crowd. "Tonight, we demand justice not just for Elijah, but for every person who has suffered under a system that refuses to change." A ripple of affirmation flowed through the assembly. The collective energy was palpable, enough to send a thrill down Sonia's spine, as if the very air was charged with the electricity of their unity. She passed the megaphone to Malik, who stepped forward with fiery resolve. Elijah believed in a future where he and his friends wouldn't have to be afraid of those sworn to protect them, Malik shouted, his voice young yet wise with the truths of lived experience. "That's the future we're fighting for right now." The protest was peaceful but resolute, the rhythmic chants blending into a powerful mantra that resonated beneath the city's pulsing neon. Weavered among the crowd, stories were shared, microcosms of shared struggles and injustices borne by different faces connected by a single thread. But as night deepened, so too did the tension, an undercurrent of unease slowly creeping into the march. Across from the demonstrators, a wall of police officers formed, their faces obscured by helmets, their bodies rigid with prepared diligence. The metallic clink of gear underlined the taut anticipation. Sonia's heart quickened, her instincts alerting her to the potential shift from peaceful protest to confrontation. Her eyes locked onto the officers, searching for any sign that the fragile truce might break. The crowd sensed it too, whispers filtering through like the rustle of unease. With every step the officers took closer, the specter of past clashes loomed large, coloring the thrum of collective consciousness with premonitions both recent and historical. Around her, allies moved quickly to maintain calm, urging the protesters to hold their ground but do so with peace. Yet it was difficult to dispel the sense of inevitable escalation, the atmosphere thickening with every exchanged glance between protester and officer. "Stay together, everyone," Sonia urged through the megaphone, attempting to drown out the acrid notes of fear. "We're here for justice, and nothing will shake us from that purpose." As if answering her rallying call, the chants of the protesters rose once more, stronger this time, a collective chorus buoyant with the sheer force of their conviction. The line of officers hesitated, caught in the waves of undeterred resolution crashing against their stoic exterior. Then, from the back of the crowd, a sudden commotion erupted. A handful of protesters' faces, obscured by hoods pushed forward, snakes of defiance weaving through the heart of the gathered throng. In an instant, tension breached the veneer of control. "Stay peaceful," Malik yelled, trying to redirect the energy, but the impulse was already loose, fueled by carelessness or sabotage, its course uncertain as shouts mingled with calls for restraint. Sonia pushed toward where the disturbance had broken loose, desperate to contain it before it pulled the entire protest into unwanted combat. All around her, fear and determination wrestled for dominance, twin forces clashing beneath the night sky. For every impulse to escalate, there was a stronger voice calling for calm. Within moments, the crowd had tightened its ranks, closing the gaps and stifling the chaos. What might have unraveled into violence instead solidified as a testament to the purpose and unity she and others had worked so tirelessly to foster. The officers lingered at the edges, tense but unmoving, their hesitation drowned by pulsating energy that sang of truth and reconciliation. The disruption slowly ebbed away, leaving in its wake a renewed sense of camaraderie, a reconfirmation of their collective will. As the protest returned to its peaceful roots, Sonia looked around her, heart swelling with relief and pride. Despite the tension, their unwavering faith in nonviolence had prevailed, standing as a testament to the strength derived from a shared goal. Together, they would continue to push against entrenched systems of oppression, nurturing a vision of justice that echoed with Elijah's spirit. The night sky watched over Thema canopy for the seekers of truth and creators of change, encouraged by the resolve that defined an indomitable community. The flicker of flames from the protesters' candles played tricks with Sonia's memory, pulling her into a vivid recollection from years past, an era stitched with her own struggles against the relentless tide of racial injustice. The introspective current swept her away as she stood amidst the devoted throng, her outward calm concealing the turbulent memory unfurling within. Sonia recalled her early days as a young woman in college, filled with ambition and hope. It was a vibrant spring day when the campus, with its wide-open lawns seemingly bathed in promise, had erupted in turmoil. She had been a mere freshman, fresh-faced and filled with the naivete that change was inevitable where right was on one side. On that day, she gathered with classmates to protest an incident that mirrored Elijah's. A fellow student, a black man of promise and intellect, had been severely beaten by the local police in a shadowed alleyway. The community had responded with outrage, channeling their disbelief into action much like they did today. The demonstration was supposed to be peaceful, a gathering of determined souls demanding answers, justice, and reform. But as day turned into dusk, what had begun as hopeful procession morphed into something darker. Sonia recalled the sudden rush of fear when chaos engulfed their unity, cries of unheard pleas swallowed by the shrill discordant notes of panic, a misstep with devastating consequences. Within moments, skirmishes erupted. Tear gas canisters arced through the air, painting the evening in acrid clouds riveted with confusion and pain. In the cyclical nature of such nights, innocence and aspirations collided brutally with the iron-fisted hands of authority. Sonia had managed to escape the initial storm unscathed, her body fueled by adrenaline meant to safeguard dreams, yet her heart remained wounded, gouged by the realities revealed that day. It was a memory deeply entrenched, sewn into the fabric of who she had become both a haunting reminder and a motivator. Pulled back into the present by the tumult around her, Sonia's resolve crystallized anew. She understood deeply that Elijah's story, his moment suspended between life and the hope for systemic change, too was a continuation of battles fought long ago, a history recast with new faces, but laden with the same profound yearning for justice. As new stories unspooled from the night, others approached her, weaving their own experiences into this collective narrative, shoring up the bonds shared by those gathered. The echoes of past fights infused their cause with an ethos of enduring persistence, a cogent reminder that momentum and change could spring eternal from suffering and shared purpose. Aunt Sonia, Malik's voice broke through her reverie. I didn't know. His eyes reflected empathy, the past not only personal but a shared legacy, assimilated into his own being. He mirrored the cycle of strength and courage of those before him, ancestors who had redefined defiance in the face of oppression and taught resilience as a baton passed through generations. Sonia nodded, eyes softened by the familiarity of recollection. There's a fine thread that connects us through time, Malik. Eclipsed moments, but illuminated by the voices of those who came before. They stood shoulder to shoulder with the gathered mass, exuding a quiet promise. No more voices stifled, no more generations burdened with narratives of injustice untold. It was the dawn of a new chronicle, inscribed by indomitable spirits, guided by the dreams of those long silenced. Reflecting on the protests of her past, Sonia allowed herself a moment of introspection, her gaze casting towards the flickering lights dotting the evening. More than ever, she understood the precarity and potency of such moments, where history's grip spoke not only of defeat but of courage reborn. Further fortified by the solidarity she felt coursing through the crowd, Sonia held tight to the realization that Elijah's struggle was destined to shape futures far beyond their imagining. As the night wore on, embers sparked, setting afire the kindling of transformation, pushing the darkness at bay. Together, they would continue to illuminate a path towards true, substantive change, without falter nor retreat. Each step forward a tribute to former battles, every stride a declaration saying that injustice cannot endure unchecked. In the hushed promise of a city's starry evening, Sonia breathed in deep, feeling history's embrace past and hopeful futures entwining into an unbroken legacy. Elijah's fight was an ancient one, yet born anew in the bold, persistent hearts of those still boldly dreaming and acting. The courthouse was abuzz with a sense of gravitas befitting the historic proceedings about to unfold. It was the first court hearing in the case of Elijah Warren, a milestone fraught with anticipation and charged with the weight of unfolding consequences. The hearing room itself was a box of solemnity, wood-paneled walls bearing witness to justice sought and sometimes denied. Sonia sat quietly, her hands knotted together in her lap, each breath woven with hope and trepidation. Around her, friends and supporters filled the benches, a tapestry of faces bearing solemn expressions and hearts attuned to the gravity of the moment. To her left sat Martha, her attorney, a paragon of readiness, with her case file brimming over the table before her. The hearing commenced under the steady gavel of Judge Martin, a figure known for his stern yet fair demeanor. His presence reinforced the room's atmosphere, promising a fair trial but casting no illusions about the complexity of the task ahead. The prosecution, an embodiment of the community's call for justice, led by ADA Jackson, began with a narrative that painted the attack on Elijah as not just a brutal aberration, but a symptom of unchecked, systemic failure. Ada Jackson's words, precise and impassioned, tore through the room with the potency of conviction. Elijah Warren's assault was not an isolated incident. It is indicative of a systemic issue within the police department, where authority and accountability have been grievously imbalanced, Jackson declared, his voice a resonant echo that lingered in the air like smoke. He laid out the charges with clarity: aggravated assault, negligence in the face of duty, authority abused to the point of grievous harm. It was a condemnation not just of actions, but of the institutional indifference that allowed such actions to fester. Sonia absorbed each word, feeling its truth resonate through her being. In contrast, the defense team rose with a cool, calculated decorum, their approach precise as they sought to counter each allegation. Briggs, the defense attorney for Officers Knight and Collins, navigated their arguments skillfully, attempting to paint the confrontation as necessary force amidst chaos. However, her words, though methodically crafted, paled in comparison to the vivid images Jackson conjured and the undeniable evidence compiled through the unrelenting work of Sonia's allies. The defense's arguments twisted facts into contorted versions of reality, a familiar rhetoric of self-justification that nonetheless failed to fully counter the public narrative now entrenched by hard truths. Your Honor, the defense will show that my clients acted within the confines of their duties, faced with a situation that demanded quick judgment amidst confusion, Briggs stated, her eyes steady as they met the judge's. The tension in the room escalated as the first witness took the stand. Dr. Madison from the emergency room, a pivotal figure who had tended to Elijah's immediate crisis. His testimony was bound to be a cornerstone of the prosecution's case, an undeniable testament to the severity of Elijah's injuries. Doctor, can you confirm the nature of Elijah Warren's injuries as observed upon his arrival at the emergency room? Ada Jackson queried, methodical and measured. Dr. Madison adjusted his glasses, his voice a calm yet impassioned recounting of stark realities. Elijah Warren was brought in with extensive trauma skull fractures, internal bleeding, and evidence of repeated blunt force impact. His injuries were consistent with severe, prolonged assault, he affirmed, each medical term a nail driven into the defense's assertions. His words stripped away the veneer of ambiguity, casting light on the dark truths of brutality faced by Elijah. Back in the gallery, Sonia felt a surge of emotion that mingled with the collective energy of those surrounding her, each one bracing this vivid recount with resolve. The prosecution and defense volleyed points with strategic acuity, yet the heart of the hearing was defined by unvarnished truth revealed through testimonies like Dr. Madison's. A narrative of grim actuality emerged that was impossible to refute or gloss over with rhetoric or bias. As the day unfolded, marked by witnesses interwoven with legal jousting, the contours of the case took richer form, fortified by unassailable facts. Sonia, ever present, heartened by each supportive glance and whispered word of solidarity, understood that through these collective moments they edged ever closer to justice. The proceedings adjourned with weighty introspections and promises of more revelations to come, leaving all parties with a shared sense of formidable tasks yet to be resolved. The courtroom emptied with a hush, the echoes of its occupants' footsteps reverberating like lingering spirits of persuasive discourse. Sonia emerged from the courthouse into the waning daylight, feeling its warmth as a balm against the day's strain. Around her, supporters gathered offering embraces, lending hope and resilience. Elijah's journey remained arduous, yet today's progress was a victory, each step closer to dismantling a legacy of impunity. As dusk settled over the city, Sonia knew the pursuit of justice was as relentless as the turning of time. United by commitment and truth, she and her community were an indomitable force zone ready to challenge entrenched powers until the system bent to the fairness deserved. In the quiet hum of evening, reflected in a city grasping for redemption, she resolved anew to remain its steadfast guardian, unwavering until Elijah's truth illuminated the path to change. In the dim confines of a back office within City Hall, tension unfolded like a muted thunderstorm. A clandestine meeting of city officials and police department representatives had been called, prompted by a seismic revelation. Confidential documents exposing systemic prejudice within the police ranks had been leaked to the press. The documents, previously held in guarded silence, painted a damning portrait of bias hiding in plain sight a truth so glaring that it clawed its way into the public domain. The room was filled with uneasy silhouettes, voices hushed and filled with an urgency edged with panic. Chief Langley sat rigid at the table's end, furiously scanning pages of press clippings and printed emails, paleness underscoring the depth of his growing worry. "It's out now. We have to understand the full extent of this," Mayor Callahan murmured, his voice taut, wary of the escalating scrutiny gripping their offices. He stood near the window, the city's flickering lights casting shadows over his lined features. Langley nodded, his expression a mosaic of frustration and determination. "We need damage control statements, something that shows we're responding." But beneath the bravado lay an undercurrent of vulnerability, an acknowledgement that their efforts might be too little, too late. The city council members, present as both audience and reluctant participants, shared conflicted glances. The documents laid bare policing strategies that were less about protecting citizens and more about implicit control. Statistical data, training materials, and internal memos revealed racial profiling and procedural biases looped within policies that dared not speak their name. The air grew dense with the same fear underpinning tightly politic meeting-san exposure that could upend careers and reputations fought for over decades. Yet the flame of public anger threatened to continue feeding upon these revelations, demanding accountability and promising consequences. "We have to come clean," remarked Councilwoman Maria Beltran, her voice imbued with the painstaking truth of someone long advocating for transparency from within. "The people are tired of waiting for answers. We must take real steps, not just pledge more empty reforms." Her statement echoed through the room, a bell of absolution inflecting each syllable. It was a step towards redemption, requiring not just acknowledgement, but a radical reformation grounded in accountability and willingness to listen. Meanwhile, beyond the insulated walls of their meeting, these revelations had sparked a firestorm, igniting fervor in the heart of the city's resident champions. Spurred by a thirst for justice unhesitating in its demand for recompense, protests burgeoned anew, banners aloft, voices raised in an unyielding symphony for change. Sonia watched the developments unfold from her living room, her phone alive with electrifying messages, links to the exposé, statements from leaders spurred to action by a newly emergent truth. As a rallying cry against systemic injustice, this newly unearthed evidence added an unshakable weight to their journey for justice. The community responded with a groundswell of activation, a newfound purpose searing through those tireless in their endeavor. An emergency town hall was organized, and Sonia was at the center, orchestrating efforts to reclaim the narrative and strengthen their path forward. The town hall meeting convened with a ferocity born of purpose, rooms filled with impassioned voices, each reflecting the urgency scrawled across newly opened wounds. Community leaders took turns at the microphone, each statement a tightening of the noose around complicity, with Sonia leading with a speech exuding the quiet confidence of someone who knew victory was on the horizon. "We stand united," she declared, her words cutting through the noise with clarity. "This is about more than Elijah. This is about uprooting the pervasive racism that has been allowed to flourish unchecked. With these revelations, we have leverage. Let's make it count." Her declaration was met with a standing ovation, a reaffirmation of their collective mission. As one, the community sunk their roots deeper into equitable soil, poised for sustainable transformation. Amidst the turmoil, those brazen enough within the police force to advocate integrity found small comfort in the lifting of secrecy's veil. The courageous step, taken by individuals within, hearkened a new era in reconstructing an organization meant to embody trust and security for all. Sonia's resolve burned as brightly as the flames, rekindling the fight for Elijah's honor, a beacon guiding others to action, even in the face of risking it all. With mounting evidence on their side and support more robust than ever, momentum carried them toward the trial set on justice's horizon. In the quietude of a night teeming with possibility and the hum of collective efforts, Sonia knew their cause had been fortified tenfold. Empowered by the revelations, they marched forward undeterred, organized, and resolute in the conviction that the truth, that unwavering beacon of righteousness, would remain untamed and boundless until justice was restored. In the digital ether where news traveled at the speed of thought, Sonia sat before her laptop, her face bathed in the cool glow of the screen. She was orchestrating the next phase of their campaign, a social media blitz that would transcend the bounds of local activism and galvanize a nation. This wasn't merely about justice for Elijah. It was about uniting voices across the country to dismantle the fortified bastions of systemic prejudice. Across various platforms, the narrative had begun to transform, propelled by those who'd taken up Elijah's cause as a personal crusade. Hashtags demanding justice trended alongside his name, sparking a dialogue that transcended generations and demographics. Every post, every share was a ripple in a rising tide of change, refusing to be contained. With a deep breath, Sonia began composing a heartfelt message intended for release across all channels. Her words were not just a plea but a battle cry, resonating with a raw solemnity that cut through the digital hum. Elijah's story is the story of countless Black lives impacted by unjust systems. We are demanding a future where justice doesn't compromise, where accountability is non-negotiable. Join us, share his story, amplify our voices, be part of the change. Her message was a single brushstroke in the mural of their movement, yet its impact was immediate and profound. Comments rolled in, expressions of outrage, of solidarity, and pledges of support, each one a testament to the connective power of a shared mission. It was a map of humanity bound together through keyboards and screens, a testament to the collective conscience awakening to challenge the status quo. Within hours, the campaign bore fruit. Influencers and celebrities, compelled by a stirring call to action, lent their voices, projecting Elijah's narrative beyond the community. It was in these resonant echoes that the ground beneath the system began to hollow, rupturing under the combined weight of truth and unity. Malik, ever a stalwart companion, sat beside Sonia, scrolling through the fevered activity on his phone, his usual humor tempered by the gravity of their cause. "Look at this," he exclaimed, turning the screen to Sonia, revealing a high-profile retweet from a nationally respected activist. Elijah's story is trending worldwide. The pride in Sonia's chest swelled as she took in the breadth of support coalescing around them, a swirl of solidarity that reaffirmed her initial steps down this unrelenting path. She understood the power of narrative, its capacity to bridge divides and galvanize action, and in this space they found both community and an ever-expanding platform. Online, videos began to circulate testimonies of those inspired by Elijah's courage, their own experiences melding into a shared vision of a future unshackled from remnants of ignorance and fear. The impact rippled outward, igniting conversations at dining room tables and in news stations, in classrooms and boardrooms across the nation. This virtual revolution, fueled by the collective, became an unyielding presence. Official statements that once responded with caution now faced the pressure of mounting accountability as citizens demanded transparency not only from law enforcement but also from the policy-making echelons that fed into systemic discrimination. This was not about appeasement but transformation fueled by ardent resolve. Messages poured into Sonia's inbox, a tapestry of voices from every state, from individuals ready to keep the flame alive, to grassroots organizations offering further support and collaboration. The chain reactions they had instigated were forging bonds previously unimaginable. Sitting in her modest living room turned command center, Sonia felt not alone but part of a burgeoning legacion, not relegated to a single community, but a diverse yet united body of voices constructing a better world. Their crusade was not finished, but it was strengthened by this confluence of advocacy and dissent, uncompromised by distance or demographic delineation. United in digital defiance, they each committed to action defined by belief, wielding the power of shared truth with each click, like a hammer striking at the walls of long-standing inequities. Each story shared, each post liked, further illuminated the path forward, creating conduits of light through darkness, resolute in their refusal to yield. Their momentum promised to surge unabated, with Elijah's name not merely a rallying cry but a herald of transformation, each digital connection another stitch in the tapestry of change. With every narrative intertwined and every solidarity offered, inevitability coalesced, a future woven into existence by many, demanded in Elijah's name and beyond. In the dim sanctuary of St. Mary's ICU room, a fragile miracle began to unfold. The soft hum of machines enveloped Elijah, a cocoon of artificial rhythms that sustained him in this suspended battlefield between life and death. It was here, amidst the silence punctuated by quiet beeping, that movement furtive and new-stirred beneath his eyelids. Sonia watched over her son with unyielding vigilance, her fingers entwined in his, a living conduit of hope. The community's journey coursed through her veins, a stubborn testament to resilience and unwavering expectation. It was her whispered anecdotes, tender murmurs of a future waiting for Elijah to reclaim, that filled the room with warmth, beckoning him back to consciousness. Suddenly, in a moment timeless and divine, Elijah's eyelids fluttered, a tentative arc toward awareness, the stilled air fractured with possibility. Sonia gasped, instinctively tightening her grip, feeling the fragile squeeze of acknowledgement return to her. Elijah was waking. "Mom," the word ghosted past Elijah's lips, barely more than a breath. The syllable was raw, tinged with vulnerability yet steeled by an intrinsic will to emerge, to face a world that had ferociously fought for his return. "Elijah!" The exclamation sprang from Sonia, vibrant with a joy that banished countless nights of anguish. Her voice quivered in harmony with her heart, a chord resounding in this refuge where faith had flickered its flame unceasingly. His eyes, once closed against the darkness, slowly opened, pupils adjusting to the pale glow filtering through the blinds. Awareness dawned slowly, the contours of reality weaving into focus. Memories collided with present disorientation, yet he saw, truly saw, his mother's eyes, deep wells of love and quiet satisfaction. "Am I dreaming?" Elijah whispered, his voice breaking through the silence, offering stark proof of his presence. Sonia laughed, the sound rich with relief and the incredibility of their shared moment. "No, baby, you're not dreaming. You're here, you're with me." Her words were a balm, sealing ruptures that had cleaved their paths in recent times. Though weakened, Elijah was radiant with a survivor's delicate grace. His gaze flitted beyond his mother, capturing others who'd stood guardian-like in his absence. It was Malik at his side, always Maliki's face a cacophony of laughter and unshed tears. "We missed you, buddy," Malik said, his words mixed with bravado and the boyish sincerity that was uniquely his. "You've got to wake up more. We're changing the world out here, and we need you." Elijah managed a smile, tentative but real, the muscles of his face remembering the warmth it kindled. Though every movement required Herculean effort, it was infused with purpose, an immutable declaration of resilience in the face of overwhelming trials. Dr. Madison, drawn to the commotion, entered the room. Confirmation of Elijah's consciousness was met with a warmth that radiated through her professional composure. "You've given us quite the scare," she remarked, her tone both chiding and tender. "It's good to have you back with us, Elijah." As Elijah's new awareness expanded, so too did the truths waiting to be absorbed, the lines and stories etched by others on his behalf during his dormancy. Sonia gently recounted the journey of those past tumultuous weeks, capturing the battles waged in his name, recounting the swelling tide of support and the systemic transformations sparked by his ordeal. Strength drew upon strength as the community's narrative unfolded, lifted by shared faith. In each recounting, Elijah discovered his name had become a beacon, a catalyst for change extending beyond personal struggle into the collective cause. His whispered thank yous, seeded with gratitude, were soft but powerful in their intent. Despite the scars upon soul and body, he understood that he was embracing a life infused with newfound purpose, a mission of remembrance and resistance, interwoven by the comradeship of those who had lifted his flag high. The room swelled with the quiet significance of newfound hope, invalidating the hospital's sterile confines with the live warmth of solidarity and love. Elijah's voice, now a fervent part of the restorative chorus, heralded the beginning not just of recovery but reinvigorated ambition. As dusk enveloped the city, the light from inside this small room pierced through with undeniable resilience, the kind of radiance that refused to go unnoticed. Elijah's story and the advocacy it ignited was far from finished. The prologue had only just closed, promising chapters yet to be scribed onto the annals of justice. Behind closed eyes that night, insomnia courted Sonia and others close to Elijah, yet there was a comfort steady in their exhaustion. Tomorrow promised more strides towards justice and healing, bridged by the steadfast support of the community's unyielding love. Together, they would continue to walk this unfolding journey, conscious of the profound truths rekindled by Elijah's awakening, a journey of empathy and elevation, illuminated by the fierce glow of a world once again enriched by his presence. The air inside the precinct buzzed with unease, a tangible tension settling over the open-plan office like a fine mist. The release of the documents and Elijah's reawakening had ripped through the department, leaving officers on edge, grappling with the reality of a scandal that had grown too large to ignore. Rumors circulated with the gale force of inevitability, whispering names and offenses, sowing distrust even amongst those previously considered untouchable. In the warren of desks and phones, Chief Langley moved with attempts at authority underscored by a simmering dread. head. The leaked documents had thrown open the gates, sparking outrage both within and outside their insulated sphere, a powder keg primed by Justice's long delay. The air shifted as Officer Torres entered the room, her presence a silent indictment against the veneer of unity the department had strained to maintain. There was a new confidence in her stride, a certainty bolstered by an inner commitment to the truth, even as she knew it carried a price. Conversations hushed as her appearance drew eyes. Torres was unfazed, propelled by a newly adopted sense of duty that surpassed the code that had previously defined her days. She was just returning from an internal meeting, each step echoing the tremors of internal inquiry, initiated by her actions and bolstered by truth. Officer Bennett caught her eye, a silent understanding passing between theme and acknowledgement that their actions were altering trajectories not just for themselves, but for the department as a whole. He approached her, the weight of decisions made dancing on the edge of his eyes. "They're rattled, and they should be," Bennett remarked, keeping his voice low. "It's about time the truth got louder than the lies, right?" "Yeah," Torres replied, her voice steady. "It's time they see everything for what it really was. We took an oath to uphold the law, not bury it beneath institutional silence." Their dialogue was punctuated with courage knit from newfound resolve, resonating against the previous denials submerged within departmental history. As they conversed, eyes flitted nervously from distant desks. The precinct buzzed with pent-up tension, knowing full well that accountability loomed large, hovering over decisions previously unraveled only in secret. The inquiry, bound to unravel those responsible, had taken form. Its potential to clean the rot was as feared as it was welcomed. And with Elijah's emerging voice echoing louder, burgeoning within the digital consciousness spreading his story, they all knew better days lay tangled amidst the turbulence of redeployment. Elsewhere, in hushed rooms where blue-clad figures masked by policy convened, names were named, stories unearthed, and categorizations dismissed. Hallelujahs and indictments intertwined, roles shifting under the scrutiny of watchful eyes that demanded the scale of justice recalibrated. Across the city, social channels teemed with the public's reclamation of justice, magnified by the momentum crescendoing around Elijah's revival. Corporate headlines adorned with his story fed a ravenous, truth-hungry populace whose appetite would not wane, driven by a growing tide of evidence-based activism. Those peripheral to previous injustices now stood central in community actions, faces unified in their mission to sustain an unrelenting focus on realignment. More than identical uniforms and slogans, they spoke as citizens awakened to their ingrained power, energizing collective foresight. In the precinct's quiet corners, newer officers, those dubbed the future, leaned into dialogue. Long buried beneath rigidities, smiling not from derison but strength, felt forming from the willingness to deconstruct safety nets in favor of transparency. They have to change, or they'll find themselves alone, one junior officer mused to another during a brief break between shifts. Her companion nodded in agreement, recognizing the paradigm shift gaining traction in this era of reckoning. As the day's light waned, leaving a sky streaked with the pallor of a setting sun, Sonia received updates, each positive tidings bearing fruit from seeds planted in adversity. Messages of solidarity from known and unknown faces alike foregrounded a determination evolving in vibrant strides towards impactful results. Through incoming texts and calls, she learned of concerns within the department, confessions surfacing not from acrimony, but from those ready to forsake deceit for progress a new alignment, promising a synergy once thought impossible. The momentum inherent in shared responsibilities spread its roots, reaching her as Elijah, within his hospital refuge, recaptured strength potent enough for vision anew. It was reverberating hope, persistence in historical culpabilities, illuminating perspectives catching up to honesty. Surrounded by these intersecting narratives of courage and consequence, Sonia's resolve swelled alongside greater celebrations unsung in shared spirit. Their movement transcended local bounds, growing in a more appropriate, ignited not merely by the present but by the potential carried into realms pregnant with change. Her part in the fabric of justice was affirmed, a fiber woven intricately into their tapestry, a tapestry tinged with righteous determination not easily broken nor diminished. The curtain had lifted, shifted, shedding light on the path forward, a path tread by those in pursuit of fairness and enriched by collective experience, bound by tomorrow's promise of equity. Together, they prepared themselves for a future not yet fully written but infinitely brighter, on burning alight with justice now, finally, unstoppable. The public library was filled with an unmistakable energy. Around the conference table, community leaders, movers, activists, and allies gathered not only to strategize but to affirm their ongoing commitment to holding the system accountable. The air hummed with a sense of purpose, punctuated by hurried whisperings and soft rustlings of paper, the sounds of groundwork being laid for societal change. Sonia sat at the head of the table, the de facto leader of this collective, a role she never sought but nonetheless embraced. Beside her were familiar faces: Martha, the indefatigable attorney; Malik, ever ready with his spirit; and dozens of others whose roles, though varied, were aligned towards the same unwavering goal. They'd met to process the wealth of public proclamations from high-profile figures and organizations, their words adding to the cascade of demands for transformation rippling through the city and beyond. These endorsements demonstrated a shift beyond the city limits, amplifying Elijah's story from a local call to a national anthem for justice. "Let's kick things off," Sonia began, her voice cutting through expectant silence with a resolve as palpable as any mission statement. "We've come a long way, but there's still so much to do." Martha nodded, spreading a stack of newly printed emails across the table's length. Each one bore the letterhead of prominent institutions, speeches by corporations, and Pulitzer-winning journalists who'd taken up their cause with fervor. "We need to leverage this moment," she said, her words like hammerfalls of conviction. "These statements give us an opportunity, one where the ground beneath us is fertile for real change." Malik, barely able to contain his usual exuberance, chimed in. "We've got some celebrities backing us now too. Some are even down to lead future rallies. Spread the word even further," he said excitedly. "We need to use this to widen our reach." Across from them, Maria Beltran, the passionate councilwoman long fighting for reform, raised her voice. "This moment requires action that ties these calls for reform into city policy. We should press for explicit commitments, not just words. We need the power structures to feel this as much as we do," she emphasized. They agreed unanimously, understanding the importance of binding lip service to substantial commitments. This was the crux of transformation, the promise to convert outrage into structured progress that would guard against future transgressions. The synergy within the room captured an understanding that tangible outcomes were sprouted from diligent commitment taking shape through litigation, legislation, and community-led initiatives. They deliberated on strategies to maintain momentum, ensuring that each voice from Elijah's to the thousands raised for change was heard by those who held the keys of power and policy. Outside, the mingling luminescence of streetlights and early evening stars cast a soothing glow over the city, a peace poised not in complacency but readiness for continued resistance and resolve. Though tactical notions were myriad and voices many, a singular truth buoyed their collective. This was their legacy to shape. As discussions ensued brimming with hope and pragmatic approach, the broader cause began to materialize into a symphony of strategies built from differing experiences and visions, unified toward justice. They were forged from Elijah's fight-a-fight that demanded systemic resilience from those too often marginalized. The evening evolved through expansive dialogue, probing potential initiatives, from educational programs to policy reform proposals, seeking to harmonize community integrity with the public enforcer. Bonds solidified between different sectors, aiming to nurture relationships and alliances towards an equitable society. With each exchanged idea and acknowledgement of their shared mission, Sonia's heart swelled with a pride born of knowing she was part of something greater, a movement enacted by determined souls not just for Elijah, but for every successor to these hallowed streets. The meeting adjourned in inescapable harmony, threaded with plans marked by intent to germinate seeds that ensured sustainable growth within, etched into the cumulative consciousness of their city and afar. As Sonia stepped out of the library, into a night punctuated by a chill preparing for forthcoming seasons, she felt inexorably drawn towards a future that promised transformation. It was a future informed by Elijah's trials, encouraging unity as the womb of change stretching across landscapes both physical and intangible. Around her, the city's voice, one powerful, diverse, and unyielding rose into the night, ready to defy inertia with concerted strength and sustained vigilance. In their mission to shore up pillars of justice still in construction, they posed an unwavering question to anyone willing to listen: will you join us in creating the world Elijah dreamed of? To those attuned to the pulse of progress, the resounding answer was clear as the starlight that cloaked the city and its steadfast seekers of justice with newfound brilliance. Each commitment carved into action promised tomorrow would be forged by those resolute enough to demand it today. The atmosphere in the precinct was different, charged with an air of inevitability, as the walls of its formidable facade began to crumble under layers of persistent truth. Officers Knight and Collins awaited their fate, shuffled quietly into the back of a patrol car as the weight of new charges pressed down on them: aggravated assault, negligence, conspiracy. The arrest was swift but monumental, each click of the handcuffs reverberating like gunshots through the precinct and beyond. Outside, the crowd gathered, a tapestry of faces glowing with satisfaction that justice was beginning to claim its due. Sonia stood among them, a silent sentinel amidst murmurs of justice finally closing its grip around those who had caused her son so much pain. Elijah's story, having catalyzed this wave of accountability, was no longer just about one boy's trauma, but a communal call to action. As the two officers were led out through the precinct's rear, their expressions oscillated from stubborn defiance to the barest hints of introspection as reality sunk in. Lines of police stood in formation, a silent acknowledgement of the proceedings, caught in their own crosshairs between loyalty and growing public reckoning. Chief Langley watched the procession from his office window, a figure wrestling with the collision of professional duty and private turmoil. His office seemed more like a bunker, a stronghold of authority now riddled with cracks born of negligence, complicity, and silence. The step taken today was both an ending and a new beginning, accountability in action, yet fraught with the promise and need for societal transformation. Sonia, surrounded by allies and supporters, felt the swell of satisfaction laced with the bitter knowledge that this victory, while crucial, was only part of the journey. The arrests signified systemic fissures exposed but did not yet guarantee restoration or healing. It was a momentary pinnacle of a still unfolding narrative. "It's a start. We made them listen," she whispered to Martha, her voice a quiet blend of triumph tempered by resilience. Martha shared a look with Sonia, mirroring the sentiment in her steady gaze. "Today's an important chapter, but the book isn't finished yet," Martha replied, her practicality familiating the triumph with purpose. "We've crafted a precedent. Now, we ensure it leads to lasting change." The crowd, swelling in numbers and charged with the electric pulse of witnessing history, watched as the patrol car carrying the disgraced officers disappeared into the city's fold. There was an understanding amongst them that while this step was paramount, ensuing steps demanded equal vigilance. Malik, standing by Sonia's side, couldn't contain his gratification, a youthful fervor manifest in quiet murmurs to bystanders who had come to support their cause. "Elijah's impact will ripple far beyond today," he remarked, his optimism vibrant. Within the precinct, others felt the weight of cumulative truths revealed. Some officers left behind felt the tendrils of guilt born from years nestled in shadows of unjust policies. The revelations left a mark, fracturing not only alliances but also the certainty with which they once navigated their duty. For a few, introspection had been sparked, providing glimmers of recognition towards a path less traveled by their predecessors' own, leaning towards empathy and inclusion. Langley, contemplating the cascading aftermath from behind closed doors, realized that tomorrow's deliberations would begin with reflections born from a reassessment of his and his department's existence within a society demanding reform. The echoes of truth were undeniable, leaving imprints for both the reformers and the resigned. Outside the precinct, members of the community, braving a brisk wind that carried whispered hope back to those awaiting news from home, reveled in a moment neglected for too long. tomorrow promised renewed dedication and rearranged efforts to sustain momentum. Local channels briefly interrupted regular broadcasting to report the arrests, echoing the news across digital planes. Reactions spread like wildfire, messages of affirmation from those who hoped to see justice unequivocally lended not just in one city, but many across the country. Sonia emerged from the epicenter, bearing witness to the change, anchored by an intimate feeling coalesced from the collective spirit, a yearning for lasting reconstruction rather than ephemeral satisfaction. Yet, in tonight's victories, there lay the seed for annealing wounds not just of one family, but of communities long threadbare by the decisions of those once towering in blue. As the sun dipped below the horizon with evening stars heralding a new chapter, Sonia and her resolute community turned their focus towards sustaining the charge, not resting on the laurels of arrest but building anew a society they could all hold profess to equally. Each heartbeat in the city pulsed with a renewed promisone of justice stretched out, expanded, and enduring. In this journey through shadows towards light, mutual learning awaited them all, with Elijah's story a poignant testament to their unyielding commitment. The courtroom was packed to the rafters, every pew crowded with anticipation, hope, and an undercurrent of trepidation. The media had descended in full force, their lenses trained on the proceedings that had captured a nation's attention. This trial wasn't only about the two officers in the dock. It was an exposé on systemic rot, an opportunity to lay bare a culture of impunity that had persisted for far too long. Sonia sat flanked by her allies, her presence a testament to months of relentless advocacy. She felt the collective breath of those who believed in Elijah's cause, a force wrapping around her like an indomitable shield. Across the aisle, Briggs prepared her clients, Officers Knight and Collins, for the day's revelations. Their defense had been embroiled with contradictions and an oft-repeated mantra of just following procedure, but the deluge of evidence made available via the leaked documents had brought cracks to their narrative. They now stood at the center of a spectacle they could barely control and did not fully understand. Judge Martin, presiding with his usual gravitas, signaled for the trial to begin. ADA Jackson, representing the state, stepped forward, poised and resonant with the gravity of the circumstances. The courtroom hushed in an instinctive anticipation of the unfolding drama. Ladies and gentlemen, today we lay bare actions that castigate the very ethos of justice. We address not only the brutal beating of Elijah Warren, but also lay bare an endemic culture within our policing that contravenes every oath sworn to protect. Jackson's voice resonated, his words like arrows piercing the defenses meticulously built by the defense. There was no room for equivocation. He was forging a path straight to the heart of accountability. Over the next hours, the trial unfurled with a relentless stream of testimonies and evidence. Witness after witness came forth, each delivering accounts that peeled back the layers of police operations shrouded in secrecy and silence. It was a masterclass in methodical exposition, an interrogation of truth versus surmise. Martha took the stand as a crucial witness for the prosecution, detailing her own investigations and substantiating claims of negligence and cover-ups. Her unwavering demeanor became a cornerstone for the prosecution as defense arguments to discredit the veracity of the evidence crumbled beneath her meticulously gathered facts. Contrary to defense assertions, Martha declared, her voice unwavering, Elijah Warren was not resisting. He was made a victim of force, disproportionate and untenable. This document trail is unambiguous. The abuse was systematic. The defense, scrambling to maintain footing, responded with counter-arguments that felt hollow in face of mounting proof. Briggs made valiant efforts to steer the case towards murkier waters, but the inherent biases, threadbare explanations, and procedural loopholes laid bare in the documents served as insurmountable obstacles. In a pivotal moment, ADA Jackson introduced the by now infamous flash drive, its contents, a damning gallery of prior misconduct, barely kept in check and inciting conjecture of wider, more dangerous cultural dynamics within the force. The courtroom held its collective breath as body camera footage of the night in question filled the screens, pulling into the public sphere what had previously been manipulated narratives. The stark imagery served as incontrovertible witness, projecting brutality that struck into every heart, leaving an indelible impression that rhetoric could not erase. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse steps, the city roared with continued demonstrations, Elijah's name still passionately a chorus for those whose patience had given way to action. No longer was there doubt their struggle had become a lightning rod for reform stretching beyond local confines. As Sonia watched the trial unfold, her heart pounded not only with fear of painful truths verified, but with fierce hope that each word spoken in this court could serve as a generational lesson, a shift their honed narrative, a guiding light through systemic shadows. In closing arguments, Ada Jackson delivered his parting shots with elegance, resolute in his casting aside euphemisms once protecting offenders by trade. He turned slightly, addressing the jury composed of community peers, asking them to consider their charge steeped in responsibility. This trial is not merely about punishment, he declared, giving finality to his charge, but about ensuring recognition of harm and reconstitution of just systems. Elijah's courage and struggle are catalysts for change, justice infinitely blind but never silent. Before the tight-lipped and increasingly fractured defense table, a decision awaited that promised reverberations long after gavel fell. In the ensuing break, as the jury began deliberations, Sonia descended the courthouse steps with newfound poise, acutely aware their work was not destined to conclude but invigorate. From here, a trail blazed by Elijah and those joining him solidified, promising that while scales of justice balanced, the pursuit of truth would remain inexorably undeterred. As night enveloped the city, one constructed from the aspirations of countless souls seeking not closure but substantial beginnings anew, Sonia returned to Elijah's bedside, melancholy softened by the light of his survival. She knew collectively they were unswerving, and as justice awaited judgment, their assembled pledge to each other remained firm, boldly invincible, beyond any verdict. Daylight seeped through the courthouse windows, casting a golden hue that settled with solemn clarity on the packed courtroom. The air, thick with anticipation, seemed to hold its breath, mirroring the collective anticipation hanging over those gathered. The nation was watching, its eyes fixated on the verdict that would ripple outward to touch every corner where justice was sought and demanded. Sonia, flanked by her steadfast circle of supporters, sat rigidly, her heart pounding in a steady, hopeful rhythm that matched the muted silence of her surroundings. The courtroom, for all its storied history and imposing grandeur, felt more intimate today, a crucible in which not just Elijah's case, but the very tenets of justice were about to be tested. The jury filed in slowly, their faces inscrutable, the weight of their deliberations resting heavily upon their shoulders. Each silent step toward their seats ratcheted the tension in the air to an almost unbearable pitch. Elijah's story, once confined to whispered conversations and muffled cries, was now a beacon that could note and would not be ignored. Judge Martin, seated high upon his bench, called the room to order, his gavel a sharp punctuation against the murmurs that had started to rise. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied, their voice steady, though tinged with the gravity of the moment. The room seemed to shrink, the focus narrowing in on the small slip of paper held in the foreperson's hands, upon which rested the outcome of months of struggle, advocacy, and truth-telling. Sonia's breath caught in her throat as she clasped her hands tightly in her lap, eyes darting to the faces of the jurors searching for any hint of what was to come. As the verdict was read aloud, guilty on all charges, the room exhaled as one, a tide of emotion sweeping over those who had stood vigil for justice. The words resonated, bouncing off every corner, etching themselves into the consciousness of all present. It was a decisive repudiation, not just of the actions of officers Knight and Collins, but of the systemic failures that had allowed such actions to fester unchecked. The prosecution exhaled almost imperceptibly, the release of months of anticipation seeping through their composed exterior. Martha reached over to squeeze Sonia's hand, a shared communion of relief and validation, pulsing between theme of vindication of their tireless battle. Tears gathered at the corners of Sonia's eyes, a multitude of emotions crashing over her: joy, relief, a profound gratitude for the community bound together by Elijah's spirit. Her neighbors, strangers, and friends who had become family caught her eye with supportive smiles and nods, each acknowledging the significance of what had just transpired. Malik, seated beside her, couldn't suppress a jubilant yes that broke the somber quiet, a sound of unbridled joy that rippled through those gathered. His exuberance was infectious, a reminder that amidst the gravity of the moment lay an irrefutable truth: their collective efforts had not been in vain. Yet even within the euphoria, Sonia knew this was but one victory in a much larger, ongoing fight. The conviction laid bare the necessity for continued vigilance, for restructuring a flawed system, and for uprooting biases that had taken root over generations. On the defense's side, Briggs conferred quietly with her clients, who sat stunned, grappling with the reality laying before them. Their belief in the infallibility of their actions had been scrutinized and found wanting, and the message sent was resounding. Injustice cloaked in authority would no longer be sanctioned with immunity. As proceedings wound down, Judge Martin addressed the courtroom, his words imbued with gravitas and an unyielding sense of purpose. May this serve not only as a reflection of justice met, but as a clarion call for reform and accountability in every precinct, every city, across this nation. With the trial concluded, spectators and supporters poured into the sunlight outside, where the city awaited with open arms and a resolve that burned anew. Cameras flashed. Journalists clamored for statements, but through it all, there emerged a singular narrative of hope and resilience, one that promised to continue piercing through darkness with its radiant light. Sonia felt the reassuring weight of Malik's arm around her shoulders as they descended the steps. Emma and countless other allies at their sides, all held together by shared convictions and the echoing truth Elijah's case had illuminated. As they joined the gathering throng, united in purpose, the chants and songs of those who'd stood by them lifted to the heavens a crescendo of sound, celebrating a hard-won, yet still tenuous victory. The city, emboldened by this collective triumph, felt vibrant, alive with the promise of what might yet be achieved. As they mingled, celebrated, and talked of future steps, their voices formed the backbone of a movement unstoppable by setbacks or cynicism. And amidst this sea of change, Sonia looked up to the sky, offering a quiet thanks to Elijah, with the silent vow that his fight could not be forgotten. This was only the beginning of an enduring commitment to rebirth justice, a journey they would all continue together, as one, stronger than ever before. As dusk settled over the city like a velvet shroud, Sonia found herself standing on the familiar steps of the community center, the place where it had begun an unlikely front line in the fight for justice. The evening's chill was tempered by the warmth of the crowd gathered to celebrate the verdict and to reflect on the journey that had brought them to this momentous day. The air thrummed with a joyful energy, a palpable sense of achievement mingling with the resolve to forge onward. Fairy lights were strung across makeshift poles, casting a gentle glow over faces both old and young, bound by the determination to ensure that the outcome represented more than just a fleeting moment of justice. Nearby, Malik laughed easily with a group of his friends, faces animated under the lively discourse. Every so often, his gaze would drift to Sonia, his mentor and fellow warrior in this cause, and he'd nod with a respect forged through shared sacrifice and triumph. Sonia, too, found herself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters, familiar faces who'd stood with her from the beginning, and newcomers drawn by Elijah's story and its resounding call for justice. Each conversation she engaged in was a stone in the foundation of the community they'd worked tirelessly to build and sustain. Amidst the celebration, Sonia's mind wandered, reflecting on the synergy spawned by shared purpose, the bonds that had formed between kindred spirits, unified across racial, generational, and cultural lines. The resonance of truth and justice had become a chorus heartened by diverse voices and propelled into action by Elijah's awakening and the relentless pursuit of justice on his behalf. Martha approached with a wide smile, eyes alight with the buoyancy of accomplishment, coupled with cautious pragmatism. "You did it, Sonia," she said, her voice both a compliment and acknowledgement. "We all did. This was as much about the past as it is about shaping the future." Her words carried a sagacity born from experience, echoing the quiet promise of sustained transformation. They knew well that systemic change demanded more than verdicts and declarations. It was accountability stretching beyond the courtroom, nesting in local governance and everyday lives. Sonia nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude informed by clarity. We set something in motion, a spark that's become a flame, lighting paths we didn't know existed. Her voice carried conviction and understanding that their work was a chapter still being written in the saga of liberty and equality. As she spoke, a slow chant began to rise from the crowd, the familiar refrain of "Justice for Elijah," no longer a plea, but a clarion affirmation of what they all hoped and believed was an irrevocable shift toward a more equitable society. The collective strength resonated, binding each individual into the greater good, a testament to unity forged amidst adversity and injustice, now wielding love, empathy, and shared hope as tools to carve out societal reform. In the comforting familiarity of home, later that night, Sonia sat with Elijah in the quietude punctuated only by the gentle ticking of the wall clock. He was healing, stronger each day, and the brightness in his eyes spoke of dreams no longer deferred. They talked quietly about school, friends, life before, and what seemed equally important, the life yet unwritten. "Mom," Elijah said, his voice a soft counterpoint to the night's stillness, "I want to make a difference, to help others like me one day." His words were not surprising, yet they seeded a profound pride within her. Elijah's courage had already become the springboard for revolution. His future endeavors would be a beacon, guiding others who might face trials comparable to his own. They shared a tender, quiet embrace, mother and son, survivor and mentor, bound together by unyielding love and shared determination. In the silence filled only with midnight murmurs of the city beyond, Sonia whispered her vow into his curls, to ensure that their fight wasn't just a cause, but a legacy. As sleep began to lay claim to the city, Sonia found herself at peace, comforted by the rhythm of Elijah's breathing. Tomorrow, she and those like her would continue their stand, holding the system accountable, demanding reform, galvanized by Elijah's story and the inextinguishable light of their collective humanity. The light faded to a gentle softness, casting protective shadows, leaving nothing untouched by the surge of shared empathy and forward motion. As the night deepened, Sonia lay awake a little longer, cradling the promise that this was not an ending, but a new beginning, a legacy forged from love, resilience, and the unwavering quest for justice. The morning after the celebration dawned with a quiet radiance, casting gentle light across the city. A city changed, yet steadfast in its bones, molded by the relentless pursuit of justice. The air was crisp and fresh, whispering of new beginnings and promises kept. As the first rays of sun illuminated the world, Sonia rose, suffused with the calm determination that tomorrow would continue to be shaped by the work put forth today. In the heart of her living room, a space that had served as the command center for their endless nights and incessant strategizing, Sonia gathered her thoughts and the relics of their journey: placards, community meeting notes, Elijah's letters written to himself during his recovery. Each item was a testament to the communal resilience that had transformed heartbreak into action and ignited hope anew. Beside her, Elijah moved with newfound vitality, his steps more assured, laughter easier to come by, a symbol of recovery not just physical but emotional. His resolve, forged in the crucible of adversity, mirrored the fire dancing in Sonia's own heart, a shared beacon warding off the darkness of injustice. "Mama, what's next?" Elijah asked, joining her at the table filled with memories and tangible testaments to their fight. His voice, now strong and clear, echoed a curiosity and eagerness to continue the torch they'd ignited together. "We keep going," Sonia replied with gentle strength, weaving her fingers through his. "We take what we've learned and build on it. We ensure that everyone who's raised their voices with us feels the winds of change." Elijah nodded, his youthful ambition a powerful call to action, a pledge to honor the journey they'd taken and to craft a future where justice wore no blinkers. The two shared a quiet moment, understanding passing between them as bright and enduring as the flame they had kindled. Outside, the community resonated with life, each neighbor an active participant in this unfolding narrative, each story a necessary thread in the broader tapestry of reform. Roads bustling with familiar faces bore the mark of camaraderie and determination. a tightly knit network of individuals emboldened by shared success and unyielding principles. The movement born for Elijah had grown roots that reached deep into the soil of common struggle, and from these roots sprung Acciona, thousand initiatives aimed at addressing core injustices still threatening the threads of their society. Sonia knew the challenges ahead were formidable, the rewards hard-earned, yet the potential boundless. As she prepared to head out, hearts full and agenda marked with tasks yet unfinished, Sonia paused, capturing the moment in a quiet alcove of reflection. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the unlikely allies met along this road, the resolute strength of Malik, the unwavering support of Martha, the new voices like Elijah's now ready to take their place in this battle. In their victories lay the formidable promise of universal equity, a remembrance of what brought them together, and the unwavering commitment to persevere. This was their legacy, a living testament to the power of shared voices raised against injustice, forged with courage into bonds that refused to break. Bracing herself for the day's work, Sonia slipped on a coat, stepping out into the brisk air, reinvigorated by the indomitable spirit that had carried them this far. Elijah followed, their strides synchronized, silent arrows plunging ever forward, firm in the knowledge their efforts resounded far beyond their neighborhood. As the world turned on its axis, their movement with history at its back and justice guiding its path was framed by yet more challenges to meet, scales to balance, lives to honor. Sonia glanced once more over her shoulder to Elijah, offering a reassuring nod, as if to say, "We've got this." And in that nod, in all its unspoken promises and understated strength, lay a question to all those who'd watched, been inspired, and joined their cause. Will you continue to stand with us, to march alongside, and to echo Elijah's hope? In this shared journey, where every voice mattered and each individual touched by injustice stood a chance to rise, they beckoned for tangible support. Likes echoed over hills, shares resonated through networks, subscriptions captured shared fidelity as bright and comforting as the dawn. The story of Sonia and Elijah Hand, of the countless souls embodied in their fight, was far from over. It was one chapter in an epic manuscript still unfolding, words inked with ambition and vision, a story they wrote day by day for those who would inherit the chapters to come. As Sonia and Elijah strode into the morning, they left in their wake a whisper of resilience, a quiet benediction on the air. And behind that whisper, a closing note, faint but fierce, demanded not just awareness but action, leaving the world listening, ready to echo its resonant clarion call: justice, in Elijah's name and beyond, shall be served.